Chinese police beat protesters who cannot withdraw from banks. Billions of dollars stuck. A massive amount vanished. And authorities are not giving an answer. What is behind the chaos over the weekend? And why are the protesters asking foreign media and the US Embassy to pay attention? I break it down here. Welcome to China Insider. I'm David Zhang. Police are beating up protesters asking to get their money back from the local banks in the city of Zhengzhou, Henan province, where last year saw one of the worst disastrous flood, now face a new round of scandals with local banks barring depositors from withdrawing money. Some $6 billion are on the line. And this is happening in various banks across China. So far, the excuse is that a large amount of the funds deposited through certain systems that the banks use are not actually deposited. They're in fact intercepted by financial criminals who hijack the deposits. Radio Free Asia reports in one case, a depositor who had difficulty in withdrawing money said that $30 million deposits inexplicably appeared in the transaction records of his bank account and then disappeared. Quote, and none of them were operated by me. Another depositor named Su Jie also found account abnormalities. Su Jie said that the bank also secretly opened an e-account without his knowledge, as well as another depositor named Xiao Hong found that she had transaction records dating back a year before she opened her account with the bank. All in all, there are speculations as to the broader reasons for this, but in more than just these four local banks that we're going to focus on today, other areas in China also saw different actions with regarding to limiting access to certain deposits or not allowing them to do bank runs on certain days. Could this be a China economic crisis situation? That is to be seen. Now, just a quick explanation as to the terms we're going to talk about today. Henan is the province where this is taking place, and Zhengzhou is the city where the protest took place, as well as Zhengzhou is also the flood place that last year we covered extensively. So I'll be using Henan and Zhengzhou interchangeably for the sake of this episode. Now, some of the protesters even held English banners. That's a first. And others resorted to posting comments under the US Embassy on China's official Weibo account, which is the China's Twitter-like social media, asking the US to intervene with foreign reporters to report on the situation. Last year, when reporters were trying to cover the flood situation in this exact city, Zhengzhou, they were blocked by several Chinese residents for her quote-unquote attempt to smear China. Many on the internet are now calling this Henan Village Bank situation a mine explosion being censored by authorities. What started out as a technical upgrade, the excuse, in some of the local banks in Henan province, quickly spiraled into authorities using the mandated COVID health tracking app and the associated QR code to limit and bar anybody from out of town to deposit and come to visit the bank, citing health reasons. And they finally couldn't hold back. Some 3,000 protesters gathered, and it turned violent when white shirt policemen undercover showed up and started attacking the protesters over the weekend. A large number of videos and photos on the internet showed up with many depositors pulling banners and putting up slogans that read, "Against the arbitrariness of power, against the Henan provincial government's violent assault on depositors in conjunction with the triads, or against the Henan government's corruption and violence, 400,000 depositors have destroyed the Chinese dream in Henan, etc." All these slogans, in addition, the protesters kept chanting the slogan, "Li Keqiang, check Henan," which was a shocking scene considering Li is the second in command following in power to the Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Calling for the second in command instead of the supreme leader seems to be strange. Now, there are three main reasons that we can see right now, outside of speculations, as to why the event is happening and once again becoming the center of attention. The first reason is the rapid suppression of the large-scale human rights action, which is protesting. And this isn't in itself a surprise, as the Chinese Communist Party already has considerable experience and a variety of plans to deal with essentially this kind of activism in China. But this time it was rare for those who threw the iron fist at the depositors on behalf of socialism. They weren't actually wearing police uniforms, but they were disguised in plainclothes. By the time that those actually in uniform, the policemen, showed up, the violence had already escalated. This is a small step in the Henan bank situation, whereas the situation with the history of the CCP's violent stabilization methods, aka suppressing protests, seems to be just another piece of cake. Now, those protesters dragged away are taken by bus out of the area with many injured severely. What the depositors thought was a legitimate and reasonable action to defend their rights instantly became a street fight. That is another example of the successful combination of Marxism with Chinese characteristics and the Chinese Communist Party and its path to stability, where the authorities not only avoided being called a police state, but also conveniently stigmatized human rights actions by calling all the protesters violent individuals who needed to be stamped out. Now, as we've covered in the beginning of the episode, the protesters even held out an English banner. It's rare for depositors to display banners in English, as such banners are obviously not for the police, let alone for the leaders of the Henan province who cannot even read Chinese well. There is only one target for such a banner, and that is the foreign media, like what we're covering today. Or rather, the foreign forces, which is often painted as the negative aspect of the American media or anybody else from the world. But the dreaded foreign forces this time might actually become the saviors.
Well, well, well. How the turntables...
If the protesters are even asking the foreign reporters to cover this, that means Chinese activists took the initiative to pass the knife to the foreign forces and actually invite them to interfere, or in this case, with the domestic affairs that they so much didn't want them to be there otherwise. Why would they do that? Isn't that bringing shame upon the Chinese people, as they always say? Well, authorities, after beating up the protesters, decided to come in and clean up the blood on the streets and pretended like nothing happened, as if it was just a one-off thing. Like we said, curbed the violent protesters, and then they just kind of brushed everything off. Well, relevant authorities have allegedly formulated a plan to pay those depositors already, so the situation should die down after some of them get paid. Since none of the mainland media reported on the depositors' rights actions, well, unfortunately, it seems the uniformity can only mean that the directions came from the Central Propaganda Department, or even higher ups than that. That means their only reliable source to get the information out of China is foreign media. But yesterday's crackdown, as you have seen, was a blockade of information on one side and a vicious attack of the protesters on another. It seems like the cycle has returned to its origin in terms of where this is all beginning, which is that nobody really helps you in China, not even the media. And it turns out the people that you dreaded the most, the foreign reporters, might just be the people that can help you out. Now, of course, authorities aren't going to care that you talk to some foreign reporters. They're just going to deem and brand you as a traitor to the party. But at least authorities are now creating a situation where they will pay them money. According to the Provincial Henan Banking and Insurance Regulatory Bureau, advance payment, aka money that you get paid in advance, will be given to customers off-book, with a combined amount of less than 50,000 yuan, or about 7.5 thousand US dollars, inclusive. So that means if the combined amount of a single person or institution is more than 50,000 yuan, or 7.5 thousand US dollars, then the advance payment will be made later. There are three keywords in this announcement I think are quite special here. First, off-book. And second is advance payment. And the third is the amount, 50,000. First of all, off-book business means that the office is still insisting that these deposits are not entering through the financial systems and going through the checkbooks. And they're carried outside the accounts, which is equivalent of denying the deposited nature in the first place, saying that your money that you try to deposit into these Henan banks are actually, in fact, non-existent at all. Secondly, the term advance means the government is blessing you with a special amount of money that has nothing to do with your deposited payments. That is to say, you should be clear that this is an additional grace from the government to you and not the government's fault that your money was lost, and they're not compensating you for it. Third, with the preceding amount, which is the 50,000 yuan, it seems quite meaningful to some, right? I mean, most depositors probably have less than that amount in their banks, but that amount is a good threshold to satisfy the majority of the protesters. What about those that have more than 50,000? Essentially, the authorities used this to limit the pricing on how much they will pay out, and essentially to achieve the maximum effect of the stability factor, which is to make the majority of the people happy. Paying a decent amount to those who are below or at the threshold is going to satisfy most people, and those small percentage of people with large accounts may eventually be able to get a little more, or nothing at all. Since the majority has been taken care of, who cares that the few remaining people, they can't have a voice? They're nothing but mosquitoes to them. In a nutshell, robbing you of your money and then asking you to be grateful that this is destined to happen as a so-called solution, paying that amount, and then the Chinese Communist Party says you better be satisfied with it or otherwise, well, punishments are coming. And thank you so much for watching tonight. This is China Insider. I'm David Zhang. See you next time.